Well, hello again. In this session, what I'm going to talk about is consequence. And in particular, how do we analyse consequence so that we can incorporate it into our risk register and so that it's meaningful. I've come across many organisations who believe that what we need to put into our risk register is the worst case scenario in terms of consequences. Well, there are some challenges there. If we do this, what we tend to do is to skew the risk or all of the risks in the organisation towards those worst case consequences. And as a result, what we may end up doing is having to treat a whole lot of risks that really aren't requiring treatment. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's say one of the risks within your organisation, and it's a risk in many organisations, are trips, slips and falls. Now, if you look at the statistics, let's say we've had 100 trips, slips and falls in our particular organisation. We won't have had, or we may not have had any deaths. We may have had one or two serious injuries that required long-term hospital treatment. But the majority are going to be in that insignificant minor area and maybe a couple in the moderate. But if we let people who are in the organisation state things like, well, in the worst case, that person could trip over, then hit their head on something and they could die. Well, yes, but that is an extreme outlier. So if you do the analysis on those 100, what you will find is that they'll sit in that insignificant and minor area. So we're not talking about worst case here, is what is the most plausible outcome. And because we are measuring a risk against all of our impact areas, all of our critical success factors in our organisation, like safety, environment, reputation, financial, we need to do that for every single one of them. We need to make sure we identify what are the most plausible outcomes for the risk event that we have identified. And in doing so, we actually come up with a more appropriate risk register in terms of what the risk levels are. One of the other issues or challenges with putting everything in that worst case scenario bucket is that it almost diminishes the risk register or the risk management process within your organisation, because people will start to say, well, everything is in that top box or that top right-hand corner, if that's what your matrix looks like, and therefore we need to treat everything. And worse than that, people will actually start to change their risk assessments so that it brings it down into that area, or into an area that's more in line with the risk appetite of the organisation. So I think what we need to make sure we're doing is looking at the consequences in terms of their plausibility as opposed to their worst case. And in doing so, you'll have a more accurate risk register for your organisation. That's all for this session. Thanks for watching, and once again, let's be careful out there.